It's time for week 8, and you need to know which running backs you want to start or sit in your fantasy lineup. We're going to go game by game to tell you how we feel about every running back that matters. First, here are the running backs that you don't need to worry about. These guys are still must starts: Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, and DeAndre Swift. Remember, if you haven't tried Underdog yet, this is the perfect time. If you sign up and use promo code ENDGAME, not only do you get a 100% deposit match up to $500, you can also take advantage of this week's new customer special. That's Josh Allen just needs a yard. You go higher on that pick. You can combine it with any of the picks, including some of the ones that we're about to tell you that we like. Then you can triple your money just like that. No teams on bye this week after such a heavy bye week in week 7. So let's get to that Thursday matchup. It's the Bucs at the Bills. What about the running backs here? Let's start with Rachaad White for Tampa. Actually did something last week, but now he was on the road against Buffalo.
Yeah, but Buffalo has not been a great run defense, especially recently with the loss of Matt Milano. He does catch passes. Look, Rachaad White's never going to be a guy that you're going to be excited to put in your lineup, of course. But I think he's a guy, if you need him, you can start him.
Well, at least he did kind of show up this past week, like you said. He can catch some passes, might need to in this game. So, agree, he's kind of still right there in that low-end RB2 radar. And on the other hand, we have James Cook. He did have a good game last week, but it's just so inconsistent here. What do you think he does against Tampa?
Yeah, he's been very inconsistent lately. After the week before looking like it was a split with Murray, then this week it looks like it's all James Cook. So really you don't know. You can never trust the usage here, but he's a good player. Tampa Bay does have a good run defense, but they're not the shutdown run defense of the past. I think if you got James Cook, unless you have really good options, you're probably starting him.
You know what's funny? I didn't know about this. I saw online somewhere talking about home road splits. You know, certain players have them more than others. There's a theory here that because he has a newborn, apparently, and that when he's at home, he's not getting sleep and he's doing terribly. When he's on the road, he's much better. I don't know if I'm buying into that. I would just say he's still a startable running back, too. And then Latavius Murray, a guy you always feel like you could if you need to start, but I don't think you should need him this week.
No, you shouldn't need him this week, and this is a tough matchup. I mean, he has to score to give you anything, not starting Latavius Murray.
Texans are going to take on the Panthers. Both teams coming off of a bye. So let's talk with Dameon Pierce. It's been kind of disappointing, and we actually saw him start to fade a little bit in terms of usage, which is the one thing he had going for him. Is this a bounce back, get right spot, or are you concerned?
I mean, you have to be a little concerned. We saw quite a bit of Devin Singletary before the bye, but this is a great matchup against the Panthers. I'm not going to put him in the, solid must-start category, but I'm going to put him in that if you need him, you can start him because the matchup is so good.
Yeah, exactly. Only because of the matchup, because Carolina is one of the worst in terms of giving up points to running backs, and they just really never play from ahead. So I think Pierce is still startable if you really are hurting at running back. Now you mentioned Singletary. Is he becoming a guy that you could consider streaming?
I think you can consider him in deeper leagues. I don't want to start him if I don't have to, but if you're desperate, you can consider him.
I mean, I feel like he's a guy that still isn't rostered in a lot of leagues, so really you're thinking about maybe picking him up if somebody you have is hurt. Again, nobody's on bye. There's less injuries, thankfully, at running back. So unless you're waiting on a guy like Monty or someone to come back and you're desperate, you really shouldn't need to consider him. And then there is an injured running back from the other side here, Miles Sanders. Not sure his status, but let's just say if Sanders does play coming off of the bye week, would you play him?
I mean, I wouldn't feel great. Houston hasn't been this terrible run defense of the past. I mean, they're not, a shutdown defense, but they're not a sieve either. He was already losing work to Chuba Hubbard. Now he's coming off an injury. Only if you need to start him.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, this injury was something that popped up just a couple weeks ago. It's not like he's been hurt all year. It just wasn't that good. This whole offense really is the issue, not just Sanders. So, look, if he's back and Chuba's still there, I mean, I don't think I can play him. So I would say only desperation territory. And then Chuba, well, different situation. Let's just say if Sanders doesn't play and he's the only guy that's getting touches, How strongly do you feel about him?
Yeah, you got to feel pretty good. I mean, he got the bulk of the carries before the bye, bulk of the touches. He catches passes. It's like I said, it's not a fantastic matchup, but it's also not a matchup that should scare you. If Miles Sanders is out, I think Chuba is a solid start.
Gonna agree. Just because he is a guy who will catch passes. We saw he had a pretty nice game, even against the Dolphins before they had that bye week. So if Sanders doesn't play, I consider Chuba a startable RB2. If Sanders does play, I'm probably just avoiding this whole backfield. Then we got the Rams taking on the Cowboys. Well, I guess we got our clarity sort of on that Rams backfield. It's not Zach Evans, that's for sure. It's going to be a combo of the veterans, Darrell, Henderson, and Royce Freeman. Let's start with Henderson, who is technically the starter here. How strongly do you feel about him now?
I mean, you can't feel super strongly about him. It is the Cowboys, but this is a good offensive line as far as run blocking goes. We know this is a good offense for running backs. He got the goal line work. He was the only one involved in the pass catching. I think Darrell Henderson, even in this matchup, is a solid, RB2 start.
Gonna have to agree with you. I mean, gonna get the volume we saw. Look, and we both know this. Kyren Williams is not some elite talent. Sorry to say, he's in a good situation. And now Darrell Henderson's in that situation, even though he's not getting all the touches. I think I feel better about Henderson even than guys we talked about like Pierce or a Chuba Hubbard. I think that Henderson's very startable. Where does that leave Royce Freeman?
Yeah, I mean, desperation only. Yeah, he got some carries, but no pass catching, didn't get the goal line run. Cannot start Royce Freeman.
Agree. I mean, you can roster him, sure, but Henderson, I think, is going to have the edge. It's not quite as close as it looks in the box score. I think Henderson is definitely more valuable in fantasy. Vikings taking on the Packers. Important game for both these teams. Now, in terms of fantasy, kind of underachieving offenses lately. Start with Alexander Mattison in Lambeau Field.
Yeah, I mean, you got to feel at least pretty good about him. He gets the bulk of the touches here. It's a good matchup against the Packers. I never get excited to put Madison in my lineups. Well, I don't really have Madison in any of my lineups, but I think this week he's a solid start.
Yeah, I kind of lump him together with a lot of the guys we already talked about. Kind of a startable low-end RB2. Not the high ceiling, not the lowest floor. Now, here's a tricky one. Aaron Jones. I mean, we found out he was on kind of a snap count last week coming back from injury, but he still didn't look that great, even against Denver. What do you expect from him against Minnesota?
Whew, yeah, this is tough. I mean, that should have been a great spot for him last week. This should be another pretty good spot for him, but he's not looking fantastic outside of that week one game. But he always does that against the Bears every year. I say it every year, and people fall for it every year. But I still think Aaron Jones is a guy in this matchup. You probably have to trust him again. So a good start this week.
I know. I feel like we're getting suckered in by these matchups. I mean, it doesn't seem like he's really 100%. If he was good to go and play, why was he on a snap count? I don't get it. But he's still startable. It's a great spot for him at home against Minnesota's defense. So he's somebody you can roll out there as long as you acknowledge the risk. But then A.J. Dillon is kind of quietly coming along after a terrible start to the season. The last two games, he hasn't been bad, but it's been against bad opponents.
Yeah, this is another, pretty good matchup. Not a great matchup, but good enough. But look, if Aaron Jones is going to be a little healthier this week, that might mean we see less A.J. Dillon. So yeah, he really needs a touchdown. I'm not going to do it with A.J. Dillon this week.
Agree. He's better off on your bench this coming week, assuming Aaron Jones gets more involved. Saints, you're going to take on the Colts in Indianapolis. Both teams with tough losses last week. Let's see how they bounce back. Start with Alvin Kamara, who did it again, double-digit receptions. Is this going to be a thing?
I mean, who knows? Who knows? But it's a good matchup for him this week. He's getting pretty much all the touches. He's catching passes. I think you got to start Alvin Kamara.
At this point, yeah, you do have to start him. And look, I'm not in on Kamara any more than you have been this year, and I'm still kind of skeptical, but he's getting the volume. And I will say this, I think you do have to start him in this matchup. I'm also looking at the early lines on Underdog for the pick'ems. Right now, 58.5 rushing yards just seems so low. I'm going to have to take the higher on that, even if it moves up a little bit. The lines move throughout the week. I think that's a smash there. Jamal Williams is still working his way back from injury. Kendrick Miller also is banged up. This team is going to depend on him still, even in the running game. Not scared about the Colts defense too much. I think you got to go higher on Kamara. I like that pick. And look, if you're just signing up for Underdog, if you haven't tried it yet, this is the perfect time. You can combine that pick with the Josh Allen freebie, and that's a great chance to win 3 times your money. So again, don't forget that promo code is ENDGAME, or you can just click the link down below. And then what about Jamal Williams? I mean, he did get activated, but hardly saw the field.
Yeah, you got to think he'll see the field a little bit more this week, but you still can't feel great about him. I cannot start Jamal Williams.
No, I mean, even when he had it all to himself, that backfield before Kamara was back from suspension, it's not like he was doing anything great for fantasy, so he's not startable. Now, Jonathan Taylor had his best game. We've seen him get ramped up a bit. Do you think he gets even more involved this week, or is it just kind of more of the same?
I think we see more Jonathan Taylor. He looked great last week, scored that touchdown. I think you got Jonathan Taylor. For the most part, you're starting Jonathan Taylor.
I think you pretty much have to. And look, I'll say it was Saints defense, kind of tough. Not tougher than Cleveland's defense. And Taylor not only was involved more as a rusher, but like I said, thought he was going to be involved a lot as a receiver. He was. I like the way he's being used enough now. I think he's a must start. So where does that leave Zach Moss? He still did get some touches last week.
Yeah, he got quite a few touches, but he didn't look very good with those touches, and it is a tough matchup. Yeah, I'm not trusting Zach Moss anymore.
Right. I think all the running backs we've talked about, most of them I'm having ahead of Moss this week. So you don't have to drop him, especially if you have JT, but I don't want to start him. Patriots at the Dolphins. Maybe a bounce back week for Miami, or maybe a get back game for the Patriots after losing to Miami earlier this season. Is it going to be a bounce back for Ramondre?
Maybe. I mean, this isn't a terrible matchup for him. Miami's run defense isn't anything that should scare you necessarily. He's getting more involved, especially in the passing game. That's good. So I think this week Ramondre Stevenson is a solid start.
I think he's fine. He again kind of lives among the RB2 range. He didn't do much when they first met. He had about 50 yards in the ground. And it's not like I'm convinced this Patriots offense is much better just because they happen to pull out a win. But he's not the worst option there. He's getting touches. He's catching passes. He could score a touchdown. So I think he's startable. And what about Zeke? It seems like he is slowly still getting a little bit more involved. But I have a feeling you're not wanting him in your fantasy lineup.
No, another guy that really has to score to give you anything. You're just banking on a touchdown, not starting Zeke.
No, I'm definitely not starting Zeke either. Now, Raheem Mostert, definitely a down game for him, the entire rushing offense. I mean, they were just shut down by Philly. Concerned here or not at all?
I mean, a little concerned, but, we knew that was a tough matchup. New England not as tough against the run as the Eagles. Jeff Wilson may get more involved. We're not sure, but this guy always can score a touchdown. I think still Raheem Mostert, a solid start this week.
Yeah, I think you definitely can keep him in your lineup. The Philadelphia defense, definitely superior to the Patriots defense these days. I wish that Miami's offensive line was healthier, hopefully better. I think Mostert still has too much upside to bench, so I'm going to start him if I can. And then Jeff Wilson, also a guy just activated for the first time, didn't see the field much. Do you think he is involved enough that he is actually on the streaming radar?
Not yet. I don't think we see that yet. I'm still not putting Jeff Wilson in my lineups.
I'm going to agree with you there too. Jeff Wilson. Look, I know it's interesting to have a Dolphins running back these days, but it's not like the Patriots are the Panthers or some of these other teams that they've, just rolled over. So Wilson, just stash and wait. Jets at the Giants. Only one running back we really need to talk about here. That's Breece Hall. How good do you feel about him against the other New York team?
Got to feel pretty good. I mean, it's not a smash spot, but it's not a terrible spot either. He's getting pretty much all the touches. He's involved in the passing game. I think for the most part, if you got Breece Hall, you're starting him.
Giants have not been great against the run. I mean, I feel like you pretty much have to start Breece Hall. We've seen what he's done. Those big plays. There's not many running backs that have that kind of upside. If I have Breece Hall, I'm keeping him in my lineup. Jaguars at the Steelers. Etienne, now there's no question here. He is rolling. You've got to start him. But do you have to start either Pittsburgh running back? They each found the end zone last week. So what about Najee? There's some life left here.
I mean, maybe, but probably not this week. Jacksonville, very tough against the run. And I know somebody's going to comment, oh, look what Alvin Kamara did against him. Yeah, he had 12 catches. Najee Harris is not going to have 12 catches. Yeah, I'm not chasing that game from last week. I'm still not starting Najee Harris this week.
Yeah, I mean, Jaguars, if anything, are becoming a little bit of a pass funnel defense. But this is the thing. First of all, you don't want to chase touchdowns from a week ago, and he didn't get enough touches to really be reliable. I think you should sit Najee out in this one. And once again, even though he still looked good, maybe he looked better than Najee, I still don't want to start Jalen Warren unless I'm really hard up for a running back.
Yeah, desperation, flex, and PPR leagues only, but prefer to sit him this week.
Falcons going to take on the Titans. I know some of you out there might be saying, how can you say you have to start Bijan? Okay, fine. We're starting Bijan. You don't have to if you don't want. Now, what about Tyler Algier, though? I will say, besides the fact that he got all the touches last week, even the 2 weeks before that, he's getting double-digit carries with Bijan on the field. Do we need to start paying attention more?
I mean, what has he done with those touches? What did he average? Like 2.8 yards per carry this week or something? I mean, yeah, it has to score a touchdown for you to get anything. I cannot start Tyler Algier.
No, agree. Volume matters, but also efficiency should go with it. And remember, the Titans still one of the better run defenses in the league. On the road, no thanks. And yes, you should still be starting Derrick Henry, but does Tyjae Spears have standalone value?
Not really. I mean, this isn't a game where they should be getting blown out, having to throw the ball a lot. I don't think we see a whole lot of Tyjae Spears this week. I'm not going to start him.
A lot of risk here, this offense, because it looks like it might be Will Levis starting at quarterback. Look, I recommended to pick up Spears to stash him, but not to start him this week. Eagles taking on the Commanders. This is another game that's a rematch from earlier this season. Brian Robinson wasn't too bad when he faced the Eagles the first time. How do you feel he does this time?
Don't feel great. I mean, he saved his day 2 weeks in a row with a touchdown, but not getting a lot of touches here. And we just saw what this Eagles defense did to the Miami running game. Man, I am probably going to sit Brian Robinson if I can this week.
Well, he's getting a lot of fantasy value out of touchdowns, like you said, and getting some receptions, but the yardage hasn't really been there. He scored last time against Philly, but only 45 yards in the ground. He's okay. He's more of a floor play these days. I think he's startable, but he's kind of like a Ramondre. You're not going to get too excited about him. And then now, instead of Antonio Gibson, who's basically not even involved in this offense, we're going to talk about the rookie, Chris Rodriguez, who saw some carries last week. Do you think that he's trending upward?
He is trending upward, but not enough for me to start him against the Eagles. I mean, if you want to stash him in a really deep league, go for it, but please don't start Chris Rodriguez this week.
I mean, with no teams out of action this week, you should not have to go this deep. I mean, you have to be in a really deep league, and even then, no. Browns taking on the Seahawks in Seattle. Sounds like Jerome Ford will be out possibly multiple weeks after that ankle injury. So is this just going to be all Kareem Hunt? And are you in on Kareem Hunt?
I mean, I'm about as in on Kareem Hunt as I can get. I don't think it's going to be all Kareem Hunt. I think we're going to see a decent amount of Pierre Strong in this game, but he should be the lead back. He can score. He can catch passes. I don't feel like he's a guy you have to start this week, but if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, I've been really reluctant to get in on Kareem Hunt at all, but it looks like we have no choice. But also, like you said, as much as I want Strong to be a good running back, he hasn't done much with the carries he's gotten. Hunt's scoring touchdowns even before Ford got hurt. He's now going to get the majority of the touches. The Seattle defense isn't scary. I feel like Hunt is a strong, I almost want to say, high-end RB2 this week. Then we got Ravens at Cardinals, Battle of the Birds. Gus Edwards somehow is now the leader in terms of long reception for the year. This is among all players in the league. Is he a must start against Arizona?
No. I mean, you banking another 80-yard catch? No. But it is a good matchup against the Cardinals. He can score. I'm going to put him in that if you need him, you can start him category.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who'll be up and down. You know, he'll have games like this. He'll also have games where he goes for, 42 yards on 15 carries. It's not the worst spot. Arizona's defense is starting to fade a little bit after a strong start. So I think I'll put him as a startable low-end RB2. And then what about Justice Hill? He's still there. He still gets some run.
Yeah, doesn't do a lot. I mean, could fall into the end zone, but that's all you're banking on, not starting Justice Hill.
Nah, I'm really not in on any Baltimore running back other than Gus Edwards for the time being. And then sure enough, Arizona, it was very nice of them to this week get Amari Demercado involved and make him the lead back. So Are we going to fall for it?
No, it's a tough matchup. I don't care who the lead back is here. I'm not starting them. If it's DeMarcado, whatever. I don't see a big game from any of these guys. Not starting any Cardinals back.
Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't really matter. Until James Conner comes back, I think we could just completely ignore this backfield. Another rematch here, Chiefs at the Broncos. All right, so Isaiah Pacheco didn't go ham against them last time. Does he do better this time?
Maybe. I will say, going back to that game, the Broncos defense actually looks not as bad. So, but still, they're not great. I mean, I think if you got Isaiah Pacheco, you pretty much have to start him in most cases.
Yeah, until further notice, still, despite getting burned a little bit last week, you got a guy like Pacheco who pretty much owns the backfield for the most part. Going against Denver, you still start him. Now, is it time to take notice of Javonte Williams, who is starting to get a little bit better each week in terms of his rushing average, getting ramped up a little bit? Can we start Javonte against Kansas City?
I think you can. I don't love him, but 15 carries last week, 80 yards, caught some passes. Starting to look pretty good. The Chiefs' defense is really good, though. This isn't a great spot for him, but I think if you need him, you can start him.
I think I finally might be willing to put him on the list of possible starters because, after going kind of like 40s, 50s in yardage every week, 82, not just his season high, but also the first time he looked, dare I say, explosive. I don't love the matchup, but I'll say Javonte is startable if you need him. And then what does that mean for Jaleel McLaughlin? Plays a slightly different role as a pass catcher. He does get the goal line work, it seems like.
Yeah, Javonte did have a touchdown inside the 5 called back on a hold, but to me, McLaughlin now, you got to be pretty desperate here. It's not a great matchup for him. I'm not going to start him.
He always, to me, is a streamer, a flex. Again, this week, you shouldn't need to go to a guy like him because no teams are on bye, but he's not the worst pick. Bengals going to San Francisco to face that 49ers defense. Joe Mixon, how are you feeling about him?
Can't feel great. He hasn't looked good all year. Tough matchup against the 49ers, but he gets the volume in a good offense, coming out of the bye, could score, catches passes, but I can only put him in the start him if you need him category.
Yeah, Mixon's a guy I'm not coming around on. I think he is what he is, so if you know what you're getting yourself into, that's fine. His 49ers defense hasn't been quite as tough the last 2 weeks, especially against the run, but it's still Joe Mixon. He's okay. All right, now the Bears going to take on the Chargers. This will be an interesting decision because Deontay Foreman went off last week. Hopefully he was in your lineup. But Rashawn Johnson might come back. Sounds like he will off a concussion protocol. So what do we do with Foreman?
I think you can still start them this week. It's the Chargers. Look, they haven't been terrible against the run lately. I know a lot of people just think, Chargers bottom 5 run defense, but they really haven't been lately. But still, Foreman looked good. And you know what I really liked? He was catching passes from Tyson Bagent, which didn't think it would happen. So, yeah, don't expect a 3-touchdown game, but you can still start Deontay Foreman this week.
Yeah, I kind of said this on the waiver wire video, is that Foreman may not have the backfield all to himself this week. I still think he's the lead guy based on what he did last week, based on the fact that Johnson has missed a couple of weeks. I think he still gets first crack. It's not a bad matchup, although you're right, Chargers have been better lately against the run. I think Foreman is still somebody that you could put out there if you need a running back. And then Rashawn Johnson, I still like him long term. I feel like I keep saying this, but I think he's too risky this week.
Yeah, definitely too risky this week, not starting him.
And then on Monday night, we get the Raiders at the Lions. Finally going to have to take Josh Jacobs off the no-brain must start because he just has not got it going. Are you considering benching him?
I don't know if I could bench Josh Jacobs, but you got to be concerned. Not very efficient, not catching a ton of passes, not scoring touchdowns. But still, it would be hard for me to bench Josh Jacobs. We've talked about a lot of running backs that I wouldn't start over Josh Jacobs so far, so I'm still starting Josh Jacobs.
I agree. It's really a terrible matchup, even though Detroit's defense looked terrible last week. They are still one of the best against the run this season. They're back at home. They're going to be angry. Josh Jacobs hasn't even averaged 4 yards a carry in a single game this year, but the volume is there. Like I said, there's just only a couple of guys I might consider putting over him. And then let's end with Jahmyr Gibbs. Turned out with good stats last week. What does he do against the Raiders?
It's the Raiders. They made A.J. Dillon look pretty good a few weeks ago. They brought Ramondre back from the dead. D'Onta Foreman just destroyed him. I think, knowing that he's going to probably get the bulk of the carries, I think you got to start him again this week.
I think so. If you got Gibbs, and this is what you were hoping for, he got the backfield pretty much to himself. It's a great matchup. You've got to start Gibbs. I was encouraged by the fact that Craig Reynolds didn't really touch the ball that much. So, yeah, if you got Gibbs, you got to go with him. All right, now you know which running backs to put in or out of your fantasy lineup. But don't forget, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, we've got it all for you. Everything you need to win in Week 8 is right here.